the mysterious pumpkin lady. Once upon a chilly evening in a remote village, there lived an ordinary-looking old woman named Mrs. Pump. She appeared to be just like any other grandmother with her white hair and a kind smile. But Mrs. Pump had a secret. She was a wicked witch in disguise. One gloomy Halloween morning, as the leaves rustled and the pumpkins grew plump, a group of curious children played near Mrs. Pump's cozy cottage.
Oh, hello, my dears. What brings you here?
She asked, her voice soft and sweet. The children explained that they were curious about her garden, filled with the most enormous, bright orange pumpkins they had ever seen. Mrs. Pump, pretending to be friendly, said,
Would you like to pick a pumpkin for yourselves? I have the biggest pumpkins in the whole village.
The children's eyes sparkled with excitement.
Oh yes, please!
They exclaimed. Mrs. Pump handed each child a small, enchanted pumpkin.
These pumpkins are extra special, and they bring good luck to those who have them.
She said with a tricky grin. The children, unaware of Mrs. Pump's true intentions, accepted the pumpkins with delight. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the enchantment took hold. Their feet turned into roots and their arms transformed into vines. They were turning into pumpkins. Mrs. Pump giggled with delight.
You've fallen into my trap, foolish children. You took something from a stranger, and now you're becoming pumpkins!
Night fell and the children's parents grew worried. They searched everywhere but couldn't find them. The children, now transformed into pumpkins in the witch's garden, waited for a glimmer of hope. It seemed all was lost until a boy from the village named Tommy passed by Mrs. Pump's house. He couldn't resist his own curiosity and sneaked into Mrs. Pump's garden. The boy selected one of the pumpkins and quietly pocketed it beneath his coat. Back at his home, Tommy decided to carve a spooky face into the pumpkin. But when he got the pumpkin's mouth, it started to move and spoke in a trembling voice.
Please, young one, do not harm me. I was once a child, just like you,
the pumpkin said. Tommy's eyes widened in astonishment and fear. The pumpkin went on to explain that all the pumpkins in Mrs. Plum's garden were Aunt's children and that he must help them. Tommy knew he needed more than just bravery to help the children. While Mrs. Pump was out of her cottage, he got inside. There he found a dusty old book filled with mysterious spells. And there, right in front of him, was a spell that could reverse the pumpkin transformation. Tommy couldn't believe his luck. He had found the very spell that could save the children. With the book in his backpack, he returned to Mrs. Pump's garden. He whispered the magic words and waved his hand over the first pumpkin. It transformed back into a child. One by one, he worked his way through the garden, freeing each child from their pumpkin prison. As the children returned to their human forms, tears of joy welled in their eyes. They hugged Tommy, who had risked so much to save them. Together they gathered all the pumpkins that remained. The children returned to their parents, who were overjoyed to see them. Happiness filled the air as they reunited with their families. Tommy, hailed as a hero, had not only rescued his friends, but had shown great courage and kindness. When the villagers arrived at Mrs. Pump's cottage, they found nothing but an empty, overgrown garden. The witch had vanished, leaving no trace behind. The children knew they should never have taken anything from a stranger, even if they seemed kind. They had learned a valuable lesson about trust and caution.